One Track Run Talk podcast. Bringing the forefront of science and elite sport to you.
Hi there guys, and welcome to the One Track Run Talk podcast, and I am Fletch, your host and also one of the coaches at One Track Run Club, and this is a very special talk with Nikolina Lauc, who is the CEO of a company called Glycanage. We go very much into the surface level information around what glycans are and also how Glycanage was formulated, the journey that Nikolina herself has been on with the company, and also her own learning curves with regards to catching up with her dad's research work. So long story short, we do scratch the surface of this discussion and the subject matter is incredibly vast. All right, this is the interview with Nikolina Lauc. Welcome.
Hello.
Hello. Honestly, it's
Long
been
time no see.
Long time. I think the last time was at the pop-up, right? You popped into London and we did a little thing together before London Marathon, like
a year ago?
Oh, a year ago. It was a year ago.
Hopefully a year.
Hopefully. I think a lot's happened in a year for you too.
For you, for sure.
Yeah. Without it, I'm getting all woo-woo for a second. I think me doing what I did was off the back of some of our conversations because of what you were putting yourself through with your change in career at the time and sort of throwing yourself into the deep, dark worlds of the science and challenging a lot of those things that we've challenged ourselves with over the years. So we're openly dyslexic, and that is something you get told from your very young age, is like you're not capable, but actually you just have to do it in a different way.
Yeah, no, I remember when we just started training. I think we were talking in the cafeteria, and I think we were talking about which school we went to, and you studied drama in high school, and I did graphics and fine art. I was like, yeah, this is where they put all the dyslexics. Of course you did.
Can't read or write. Go.
I think this is when I got that you were dyslexic, or we started talking about it.
Yes.
And it's so simple. It's because the way you were teaching me exactly is it learned. So I was like, ooh, yeah. So
for context, we were kind of working on boxing was our sort of initial interactions, and we actually put you in for a fight. We got you to do your first fight as well, first and last. we didn't get back into another one, maybe but then that's kind of how it all started off. Was we were training, and then you were then a while now getting involved in my dad's business, and then we're like, oh, actually high intensity exercise, can we look into this and how it affects things? It just started to snowball from there, right?
Yeah, no, I really enjoyed it, and I think at one point, I used to just go to a gym, but it got so boring. So doing something where every time you learn something new, which is what I've done before, because I've done acrobatics, so I always enjoyed it. There was always some kind of new challenge to do, and you just don't have this in the gym. So boxing filled that in, but mixing it with the startup at the time, mixing any training with the startup at the time was super hard. Yeah. And what I loved is that if I had a bad day, you would push me just to ride them out. If I had a good day, then you would push me really hard. So it kind of really worked with my schedule, and I could never replicate that. I tried, once you moved out of London, I tried a few times, and I trained with a boxing teacher who trained the champions. He killed me every time. I was on the floor. And every time I got COVID. Every time we did a few sessions, 2 weeks later, I was down with COVID. I was like, this is not sustainable.
I can't keep doing this.
I can't do that and have a business and everything else.
Love it. I might just actually realise we've opened the door, so 2 seconds.
Yeah, don't worry. Lots of cutting in between.
Exactly, yeah. Cut. But I think that's kind of my style was very empathetic. I think that's kind of carried me through my current coaching as well, is the empathy behind people who have lives outside of training. And that's obviously what we're going to come into a lot today, is that stress is stress, and whether that's through training, work, emotions, previous experiences, who knows, it all has an effect on the body. And we're not training Olympic athletes, we're training workers and people who've got other things to think about. Their body's coming in at suboptimal levels, and we're going to have to then adjust that slightly. Combat sports are notorious for just seeing who breaks first. And
Yeah.
whoever doesn't break, okay, you're going in the ring and you're going for a world title, basically. So yeah, okay. That's good to know that there's still there's still people out there that just want to push and push them into the ground and COVID every time, which is interesting.
Everybody, I think majority of trainers do. And we
So
measure
you've
that.
sort of coined this new, not phrase, is it inflammaging?
Yeah. Well, we didn't coin it. It was coined by an Italian guy,
Yeah,
Claudio
yeah.
Franceschi.
He's not here right now.
2006, still alive.
Okay. Love it. Okay, well, you've adopted and sort of made it part of your process,
We
right?
found a biomarker for it. And at the beginning, we were purely using technical language, which is IgG glycosylation.
We'll slow that down for anyone at home.
Alien language around it. And then we realized it has to be something that is relatable and people understand. And this is the most, this is kind of the truest way we can explain it. It's inflammation.
Amazing. So on that note, take me back to the beginning of all of this.
Ooh.
Right back to the very beginning, the history of your...
How far do you
Oh, well. Well, basically, I think it would be quite nice to hear for your outsider's perception of your dad's original research and his sort of like his journey with it and why he got into this. I think it's a fascinating story of how he stumbled across what he did, and then how you then wanted to get involved. And I definitely want to talk about the dolphin brain in the fridge story. Was a highlight of one of our training sessions together. That's going in. So yeah, probably from like when you were seeing your dad do all the research and what got him into it in the first place.
So then let's start with my dad and my mom.
Okay. We're going here, are we?
So they met in a lab, or they somehow ended up together in the same lab. I think actually my grandfather first introduced them, but they both ended up in the same lab. And my mom was 24 and he was 19.
Oh. Good for her. Is that
Good for him. And he was really, like, he was always very ambitious. And, they don't really... So the way how he got into this lab is actually really funny. He had this, nobody wants a young scientist. They kind of waste your time, and they're just ambitious kids. They're just gonna waste more of your time than they're going to be beneficial. Mm-hmm. So this lab director gave him a challenge. He gave him a few. He was like, okay, so if you want to work here, you first need to, and it was a neuroscience lab. Okay. But he started working on glycans. He got some tools to look at glycans. Huh. And this actually glycans and brain, but this is for another podcast. Okay. Or something. So he told him you have to be a brain of a calf that's 4 hours old. Oh. Like, okay, where do I get a brain of a calf that's 4 hours old? And he called his dad. And they pulled a few strings and he got a brain. Wow. And brought it to the lab. And then the guy was like, okay, now you have to, use this, I don't know how you call it, but basically you have to turn this whole brain into a homogeneous mass of brain. Mush, yes. And there was no reason for it. The guy was testing his persistence and willingness to complete a pointless task, a pointless hard task. Yeah. And he did. He did that for 8 hours for 3 or 4 days, like slowly until it was
I think I just chucks it in the bin.
And then it got chucked in the bin because there was no use for it. It was purely just to test, if he's qualified to work in lab. And he was like, okay, then, now you can work in the lab.
Love it.
So this is when they did their first work together and they looked at glycans and aging in the brain. Okay. So he brought in this kit to look at glycans, and it was a completely new thing. And I think I now need to explain what glycans are. So glycans are complex sugars that we evolved to enable multicellular life. Mm. So when we were single cell, we didn't, cells didn't need to communicate. So how he wrote a paper on this more than maybe about 15 years ago now, called the third revolution in evolution. So it's a way how we change how we function, how our molecules function, without having to change our genes, without having to turn them on and off, which is epigenetics. Mm-hmm. We can change function of these molecules through glycans. So once you've gone through these 2 steps, first step is nucleic acid, then proteins, and all proteins after multicellular life are glycoproteins. Also, majority of lipids are glycolipids. So it's this kind of complex molecules. They have function, but they're like a language. That helps everything in our biology communicate. So he got fascinated by it. And nobody was really studying them. They were very complex. You didn't have tools to do it. But it was his obsession from then. So this is where we got into glycans.
Love it.
And if I do a talk, I also do a little joke on this because people don't know what glycans are. So it's say, your blood groups are defined by glycans. Your immune system communicates through glycans, and that's what we measure today. Cancer disguises itself in glycans, and conception happens through glycans. So cancer puts these healthy glycans on to evade the immune system. Sperm does the same thing. It puts healthy glycans on to evade the woman's immune system. So I say that in 1991,
everyone's intruding, basically.
My mom and my dad had an accident child, the first child, and then another 2 accidents, supposedly in 5 years. How irrational can you be as a scientist? And all that happened for glycans.
All right. You're here because of glycans.
Of course, yeah, we all are.
I love it.
And then getting to the brain. So my mom's a neuroscientist. My dad went into glycobiologist. So he's a full-blown glycobiologist. He said molecular biology, and then you select your field. And this really wasn't a big field, but it became his field. And he's actually one of the most published people in the world in this space. So it really was an obsession. It became the #1 thing. But at the beginning, they used to collaborate a lot. And you can actually follow my parents' relationship by the co-authors in their papers. So up to a certain age, mainly my mom was a co-author. And then after a certain period, it was mainly my stepmother who was a co-author, who's an epigeneticist. And both of them were older than him. Right. My mom's 5 years, my stepmother's
Lauc
2 years.
Al has just changed their relationship status.
Oh, it's hilarious. So I had, you have the story. I have so many of these funny stories because you want to know how it was to, grow up with parents, scientists. And neither of the two. Well, you are now a scientist.
I'm now an official sports scientist, yes.
Oh, I'm so happy for you for that.
Oh, thank you.
It's a tough life.
Yeah.
So at the beginning, she wanted to, she had a child, and I think she had her last kid just when she was submitting her doctorate. So she kind of did all of that hard work in between, and also in the middle of a war. So I don't know why, but yeah. So she tried to have the baby in the lab. So she would have a crib with the baby. I was just under.
Or not deliver the baby in the lab, but have it around. Okay.
Well, she does the work in the lab in Germany. They were doing something in the lab in Germany, and then at one point they created a new policy saying no kids in the lab. And I was like, how not? We can have dogs. I see dogs here. What's that?
What is all this?
So therefore they shipped me off to my grandparents for a period of time. But we always had this, we spent a lot of time in the lab as kids. Wherever they were, because they were young parents, we had to come with them. And we kind of got fully integrated in their world. And, they were, this was 1994 or 5, whatever year. And it was kind of, it's Croatia. So it's basically, somebody called my mom saying that there's a dolphin that got stranded on the shore, like a dead dolphin, and they have a brain. So they send...
Said no one ever.
Well, it was very interesting at the time. So they shipped this brain to the capital where my mom was over the weekend, and it ended up in her... Well, so I was hungry. I was 4 or 5. God knows how old I was. And there was usually nothing in the fridge. And I opened up the fridge. There's a pot. So I take out the pot, take out the lid, and there's a brain in the pot. So it ended up in our fridge for the weekend. And from that moment, I've never opened pots in my mom's fridge.
Right. Yeah.
Never. Like, if there's...
I just don't know what's going to be in there. Oh, well, I can say that as a sports scientist, I've not put any brains in my fridge yet. Yet.
Maybe frogs.
Maybe frogs. Okay, maybe a set of lungs.
Human-like muscles.
Yeah. There's some sheep lungs I can put in there, and so the pulmonary exchange. Sorry for any of the vegan. Obviously, there are many other sources of science you can do out there apart from on animals. Okay, so you've then kind of like distanced yourself from science at this point. Didn't want to have a brain in your fridge when you were. What was in the turning point? 'Cause I know you were in property and had your own business, very successful entrepreneur, and in your own right. And you've already mentioned this is probably down to your different way of thinking and your more sort of go-to attitude, get out there, get it done, go so on. What then turned your head around to then looking at the science side of things again? So
I think I've always had I've had this insane curiosity. And I think that's something that you have to have. I think biology is the only thing we're not going to solve anytime soon.
You heard it here first.
But I think this entrepreneurship side or entrepreneurial thing was a story from my whole life. So, and it started with animals, funny enough. And I can tell you all of these stories if you like.
Yeah, absolutely. I want to hear how you.
I think maybe I did in the past, but it kind of was something that I recognized. It's it was kind of, how would you put it? Any resources you have, turn them into commerce in some way, in the nicest. But basically, I used to pick up my little brother from kindergarten. I was also in kindergarten. We were together in kindergarten. I was 5 or 6, and he was the smallest one. So he was 2.
Okay.
Yes. And I would take him home. It was very short. It was a very short walk.
I would not trust my 5-year-old to take my 3-year-old home.
It was for, it was like a friendly, this was now it was Croatia, but it was former Yugoslavia. Yeah. Everything was very peaceful, and, there was no harm that can happen, and it was all a very small place. And they helped my parents to delegate a little bit. So I took him home, and when we were walking home, there were these puddles, drying puddles filled with tadpoles. And they were going to die because they were drying up. So I would take these bottles and collect all of these tadpoles. And then go home, and I would negotiate with my mom to put them in the bathtub so that they can survive. So logical, we don't need baths. Yeah. We just need to grow tadpoles. So she negotiated with me to put them into pots and pans. Again,
it's a strong negotiation. I was going to say
the utility, the resources we have in the house on the balcony. So, so I did, and then you had to feed them. So I didn't know how to feed them. I would give a little bit of bread, and then bubble up. Don't give tadpoles bread. It causes them tummy issues, and if you didn't survive. So
that's called research as well.
So she was like, then I asked Mom, "What do you feel to feed tadpoles?" And of course she knew, but she didn't want to tell me. So she gave me a book, and I was horribly dyslexic, and I could not read for a long, long time. But I really tried hard to figure out and understand, and went through this book of frogs and whatever, and learned about microorganisms.
Whoa.
So then every time I was going back from kindergarten, I would pick up muddy water, exchange it with and they grew into little frogs. So I had a balcony full of little frogs. So what was I going to do with these little frogs? I put them in a jar, took them to kindergarten, and sold them to kids. So
of course.
For Pokemon cards or for money, for candy. I even had a special deal. If you take 2, there was some kind of, I don't know what it was.
Oh, you doing buy one, get one free, but
there was a buy one, get one free. So I think this is where it started.
This is probably as early as entrepreneurs get.
I think so. And it continued. I continued in many, and I don't want to tell you all the stories because there's so many of them. And my brother would give you so many funny stories. But it was kind of something I was good at. And I tried other things. I tried school, and I was not good at anything at school. I ended up in art school because I would be bored at class, and I would draw. So I thought, maybe she's an artist. Let's just, ship her off
Just
to where she belongs. But then I ended up in London to study in art school. Started with graphics, and then I realized that in the fine art course, you have something called studio work.
Okay.
And your studio is wherever you want your studio to be. It can be home, it can be wherever you imagine your studio. And it's a big chunk of time that goes to your studio work. So basically, you have a big chunk of time to do whatever you want.
Sounds fantastic.
So I started a business in uni. And I decided that, my studying is probably pointless. But I didn't want to do some other 4-year school. So I went to this very intense programming course.
Okay.
Software engineering. And I want to build this platform. And who had a problem, she had a lot of clothes, a lot of fancy clothes, but never any money. So I was like, why don't you sell your clothes? And we don't do the old school way of put up a stand. Let's do it online. Let's do it on an app.
Yeah.
So I built this app for peer-to-peer second-hand clothes exchange.
Wow.
I made a little bit of money. I even got an offer from the university incubator for investment. They wanted to give us because it was only me, 150K for 30% of the business.
Okay.
And I said no. I thought it was a bad deal. 20 years old.
What have you done?
21. I was like, no, it's like $1 million.
Love that.
So this is how it all started. And then we feel like we can get into prop tech and travel and everything else I went through. But I think even from that age, I was about 19, my dad was telling me, we discovered this thing, we can tell people's age, like their biological age. It's kind of, and I was 19, and I was trying to do startups, and I was telling everybody I was 25. So I was like, why would I want somebody to know? I thought this would be public information or something. Once you do it, it's just everybody knows.
Yeah.
So I didn't see the point of it, and so I want to be older, not younger.
Yeah.
So it just wasn't the right time to pitch me this idea.
Right.
But he continued, the research continued this pace, and it's such a I think this potential of glycans is to see what's happening with biology for our time. Because you have the genetic influence, you have the epigenetic influence, you have the environmental influence, and then you're seeing, and in our case, we're looking at on the immune system, but it's pretty much everywhere. It's like this top layer we have that holds all the information and has a function. And then you have to go down to figure out, what's driving it from the genetic side, what's driving from the environmental side. And some things now we can, some things have specific signatures. So we can start to decode a little bit of it. But yeah, it's a very complex space.
Very, very cool. But in true fashion, you took the risk, but because of your experience to risk embracing attitude, you've then turned this business completely around, and I've just taken on 4.2 million as an investment. Congratulations. Huge congratulations. Nothing else to say on that. But as you know, it hasn't been an easy road, but we'll talk about that in a second. I'd like to go right back to how did your dad pitched you? We found how to measure people's age. How did he do that?
Ooh, well, truth is, you can measure many different ages. You can give an age to your eyes, to your ears, to your hair. You can give
My hair is definitely a lot older than it was when we first met, that's for sure.
But this is the immune system. And it kind of goes into everything that keeps us alive. From response to infectious disease, to killing cancer, to autoimmunity, to this low-grade inflammation that turns into cardiometabolic disease. So if you look at what kills us, it's a big component of most things. So it's a type of aging which is more related to health or a health outcome, where we can measure something super early on and regulate it throughout our life to try and prolong that health for as much as possible. And the aging space is super exciting. Like I was so skeptical about this. And it is, space has a lot of interesting characters.
Yeah.
So when I was first looking, because, sorry, we didn't come from the aging perspective. We came from the glycan perspective. We stumbled onto it. We don't. My father doesn't care about his own mortality. If anything, he counters that every day with eating decisions. So I don't.
How high can I get it?
How high can I get my biological age with my poor decisions that I know I'm making? So it's it wasn't kind of a search for immortality and when I started to understand it, because I first thought it's just some vanity metric or it's something for narcissists. I realized that this is actually the beginning of health decline, where instead of you tackling a problem like firefighting at the end, when a bunch of different organs fail one by one and they all kind of connectedly start to malfunction, you can tackle it at the core before you get to the first problem. And you can delay all of these sets of magnitude of problems by tackling something very simple, just very early on. So that makes sense. It's preventive healthcare. It's how we should do healthcare. It's what we should be doing from our 20s, whatever age. We should have this information and control our health throughout life, rather than wait for the firefighting, a symptom, a real problem that you generally just maintain somebody in a sick state with good plasters, but eventually they're going to fall off. So I lost my train of thought now. Maybe you can take it back. Where did I go?
It's great. It's a great route to go down. What was the initial thing that your dad was like, we found something here? How did he stumble across aging someone?
So they were trying to look at diseases, because most research funding is for disease. And when they would look at disease, unless they had age of a patient, they couldn't understand the disease. Because you can have a young person with Crohn's disease that looks like a healthy old person without disease. So there was something there, age-related, that just messed up their studies. So they were like, okay. And they were starting to study cohorts which are bigger and bigger. So there was already maybe 6,000 people at the time when they developed the clock.
Wow.
Now we study 200,000 people. Different genders, populations, you have to see if this is the same everywhere. And it really is. We all age in very much similar ways. So they realize they're measuring some type of health age or biological age, which is maybe not even related to a specific disease, but is connected to the aging process itself. And then they model this clock, the glycan clock, the glycan bio-age clock, something like that. It was called in the first study. So we're stuck with this name forever, the glycan age, the glycan bio-age, or whatever it was. We can't change it. He even has an idea how to interpret it in the future, the age of glycans. We passed the age of DNA or whatever. Now it's the age of glycans. Oh, great. The marketing ideas from my father.
So to kind of like bring it into that context of, so we're looking at sports science, for example. We are excited if we see 100 people in a study. We are like over the moon if we can see 100 people in a research project. To have 6,000 people as part of that data collection is huge. And now to take that to 200,000, that's like epidemiology kind of style research. So that's a massive, massive data collection piece. You don't see that in many other things. Not even some like clinical trials for drugs, you don't see that kind of data.
No, you don't. And, this is 17 years of accumulating this. And it's all grant supported. And it's all these big cohorts, biobanks, disease cohorts, aging cohorts. Luckily, we just do the glycan analysis. We don't need to actually run few we do. We do run some trials, but usually that's delegated. So you do the hard work. You find us 100 people. You control the intervention, and you collect a little bit of blood and send it to us. So we're a specialist in that area.
Love it.
And it's still hard. The analysis
You've got a very clear job here.
Really, really hard. It is because the structures are so complex. It's like now it's 10 days of steps in the lab, and you have to, like, we even have robots, but people are more efficient than the robots. But the structure of them, like in a protein, you have well, in DNA you have 4 building blocks. In protein you have 20. Glycoproteins are thousands of building blocks. So for you to properly do these scale studies, that's a real challenge. And I can tell you stories of how they did the first 1,000, which was a real hustle. But we're the first in the world who did that.
Incredible.
It was our lab and another lab in Dublin. The lady in Dublin developed these tools to look at glycans at scale, and somebody had to do it. So somebody had to analyze these 1,000 people, and there was a lady who was doing her PhD, and it was at the end of it. But my dad convinced her to let go of her PhD and do something else. Because nobody in the world has done it before. So why would you miss this opportunity?
There's a common theme with your dad here.
So she let everything go, all of her God knows how many years of work, to fly to Dublin and analyze 500 people by hand.
Wow.
Sleeping in the lab, sofas, whatever it was, however long it took to do it. And then she came back to Croatia and did again with another 500 from Croatia, and that was the first 1,000 human glycans ever analyzed.
Did she get a PhD eventually?
Yes, she did.
She did, yeah.
A great one.
Okay. Amazing. Okay. So I think there's been we could talk about everything forever. I think I'd like to get into the idea of what are the other things people have used to try and do similar things.
Training.
So there's telomeres, epigenetics, or testing will tell you how old you are based on these metrics. Where are the gaps in those? We've spoken about telomeres a lot over the history, and I'd love to go into the current update on telomeres, because the founder of telomeres has also spoken to you as well, right? Or some of the proficient users of telomeres have spoken to you about it before.
Well, I think we even have a study coming out on telomeres now. Telomeres and glycans. It's just being drafted. But this was the first comparison. So when we published the paper, the aging clock one, 2013, we compared the telomeres. And telomeres, generally this kind of variability from age, you can explain really well. You can explain 15 to 25% of it. And in glycans, we can explain up to 70 in women, 65 in men. So it was much higher, the explainability of why is somebody older or younger. But really it goes down to, all these theories of aging that we had throughout the years that evolved. So the first theory was, telomeres control aging of a single cell. Once they get too short, cell is going to die. So the theory was, okay, if we stop shortening of telomeres, we can fix aging. But, you have cells which are supposed to die, like cancer cells. So if they have too long, which is a big problem, they have too long telomeres, then they can be mortal, which they are. So it's more of aging on a single cell level. And because you're made of trillions of cells, if you want to pick up a systemic age from telomeres, it's really hard, depending on where you collect the sample. And if you collect 2 samples from the same person the same day, they can vary by 10 years because you collected a bunch of different cells and they have different ages. So the best way to maybe immune focused is to measure them from bone marrow. But who wants to give bone marrow to measure their telomeres?
Nasty procedure.
So this is where telomeres didn't really work out in the health predictions, being able to interpret them. But it's a very exciting space. Still lots of good science happening there.
Also, just for context, the variability piece is a big part of what defines research. And if you're looking at the explainability equations that come off the back of research, 20% is not strong. It's kind of like moderate. Whereas 70, 65%, that's like almost guaranteed causality.
Yeah. Well,
certainly
huge. Going in that direction.
Yeah.
Proving causality in people, that's your journey.
Yeah, but it's getting a lot closer than 20%, that's for sure.
Definitely. Then epigenetics. So our Glycanage was published at the same time as Horvath's first epigenetic clock. So we're equally old on the market, but of course epigenetics have been applied broadly because you have thousands of, I don't know the exact number, but if I'm guessing, I would say maybe even 100,000 people who can work on epigenetics. And you have a couple hundred glycopologists globally. So
ta-da.
That's it. Your pool is very small. The body of work, a lot of it, like our lab, generates 85% of the global human glycom data at the moment.
Wow.
And my father co-founded the Human Glycan Project, so they're all collaborating. There's all these 300 glycobiologists come on the conference once a year, and they figure out how do we scale this space and have impact. But it's so epigenetics is turning your genes on and off, and this does happen with age, and you can model an epigenetic clock on many different things. You can model a clock on mortality prediction, health event prediction, on maximum lifespan. Even you can model an epigenetic clock to predict routine blood work. So instead, it gives you the same result. Blood work is cheaper, just do the blood work. But you can model a proxy from epigenetics. So they're like a very rich information set that captures many different things. And the problem is you don't know what's driving these clocks in a way. So you have to go down and figure it out. With glycans, because they're functional molecules and work has been done to figure out what they actually do, we know that they're regulating low-grade chronic inflammation. So some glycans are making you more pro-inflammatory, some are anti-inflammatory. There's a whole cascade of function they have to make your immune system functional. And that's what you're looking at. You're looking at this kind of loss of different functionality of the immune system that then leads to autoimmune, not beating cancer, cardiometabolic, in fact, injury as well. So
okay.
we can go into sports maybe.
Yeah.
But
Okay, so just kind of like to bring in some definitions, I think would be quite cool for people, because they've probably changed since the consumer's getting fed this word inflammation quite a lot. And I think they'd be quite nice to either redefine or confirm the definition of what we are seeing as inflammation, because the biohacker scene and the sort of optimization scene is very much around anti-inflammatory, where we know that acute inflammation is really good because it helps drive protein synthesis, it helps us build muscle, it helps us create more dense bone, all the good stuff that we do from exercise and other bits and pieces. It's how we've managed to progress from not ever running before to running a marathon. That's how through inflammation. But your test is mainly measuring chronic inflammation, which is there's been there. You don't really see much change within sort of 2 to 3 month period. Like 3 to 6 months is kind of where you would.
You do choose see. So there was a study that was even out when we were training.
Okay.
We spoke with a sprint study, if you remember.
Yes, yeah, I remember.
So the sprint study, it was a group of 40 men, 35. Ex-sport school. So they were kind of already, their bodies were adapted to a certain level of training, but they didn't do anything else apart from sprints in that period of time. And we measured their glycans in biological age, and they change in an anti-aging way, but they looked at both acute inflammatory markers and glycans. And glycans have a half-life, or the ones in immunoglobulin, of 3 weeks. Right. And actually the glycans on immunoglobulin control the half-life. So if you have severe COVID, then they'll shorten it to a week. Right. But in this case, it's not so severe, so 3 weeks. We measure them after 8 weeks, and we only see this anti-inflammatory, anti-aging change with sprinting. Acute markers go up. Yeah. So the acute inflammation is helpful. It's there. It should be there. It's not the right biomarker to measure with sports because it's not bad. But with the chronic side, we see that if you're training in a way that your body is handling it, you're only seeing anti-inflammatory changes. And so the learning there was that, maybe we can measure the good side of sports. Like you can tell between the good and bad inflammation in sports. Then there was a bodybuilding study that was also published at the time, so we spoke about it, where they had female bodybuilding preparing for a competition. Then we measured before, during the peak of competing, and then recovery. And before they have, healthy baseline. As they compete, 2 cohorts. One is just on diet. The other one is diet and exercise. And it's like the diet and exercise is like severe low calorie. So we see both of them age. If you're bodybuilding, you are doing sufficient damage to create chronic inflammation for the period of your competing. Then we measure them 3 months afterwards for recovery. And we see that the cohort that just did training, so no calorie restriction, recovered. They're back to their baseline. The group that did very low calorie and intense training at the same time did not recover. Their inflammation was at the same, a little bit less than competing, but pretty much there. And they looked there, in that study, they looked at gene expression, all other inflammatory markers, everything changes in a pro-inflammatory way. They lose bone density, their cycles stop, their hormones go low. So there's a whole cascade effect which mimics aging, mimics menopause.
Love to go into that as well, because if you're working on that as well.
Yeah, we can do if we have time.
Yeah.
So the learning is that training needs to be accompanied with the right amount of energy. So nutrition, rest. So having a balance that you're doing damage, but you're recovering from that. Because what you really want, you want the short-term damage that helps you build better muscle, but doesn't have any long-term. And for performance, that is a different story, because if you're training for longevity, this is how you should train. You should minimize chronic inflammation. But if you're training for performance, you will sacrifice yourself, and you have to sacrifice yourself to perform. So that is a completely different industry. And there, what you're trying to do is minimize the damage as much as you can and support recovery. But you will do damage, and you're supposed to do damage because you're trying to be the best in the world and stuff. You're trying to win a game. It's at your own sacrifice.
There was a really cool study that was done that looked at inflammatory markers in the blood around the muscle, and then inflammatory markers within the muscle itself. And then the inflammation around the muscle reduced because there was less blood flow. Like the person's leg went white because there was no blood flow to it. But within the muscle, the inflammation was still there. So just because you're removing the blood flow away from it doesn't necessarily mean the damage isn't being tried to be repaired, which is part of inflammation. All those neutrophils and all those things that are going in to break down the old tissue, repair it with new tissue. That's what may be creating that discomfort. So, yeah, I'm not convinced yet that ice bath. I'm probably got a bit of a bias towards it because I just don't like them. But I think they're a great challenge mentally.
I tried one in Costa Rica around the New Year. It's really cold. It lasted 15 seconds. I think the next time maybe a minute and a half. But it was fun. I mean, it's like a adrenaline rush, and it feels like it's kind of. People challenge themselves to go to a gym at 6 a.m. and then they feel good for the rest of the day and they perform better work because they feel like they've done something hard. So maybe that's the thing that helps, because apparently there's some, I don't remember, was it you or somebody else who was telling me that if they do the ice bath and you measure their performance in the game, the next day they do better or the same day. So there is an element, there is something beneficial there, but it's probably not inflammation, it's something else.
Yeah, and there's a rugby study that was done that was looking at perception of recovery. And if you can make someone feel better, they're more likely to perform better. If someone's walking into a game feeling like they've been hit by a bus, they're probably not going to be emotionally prepared to then go and do it all over again. So that psychosocial part of it's verging on placebo effects. If you can kind of feel like that psychosocial part of placebo, and then someone perceptively feeling better, they're more likely to do better. Where performance can be very much influenced by other things outside of biology.
Oh, yeah.
So something you have done a bit of is the intermittent fasting piece.
So this is also new. I might be published already. The group is 60 people. They don't always notify us. Sometimes they do. There's a journal club every other week. So we first did a lot of work on caloric restriction, which is not fasting. But we did caloric restriction, 800 calories. And I should be eating at this point.
Your tummy's like, I know about caloric restriction.
So it was 800 people, 700 people, 800 calories per day for 8 weeks.
Wow.
And
that's tough.
It is tough. You cannot maintain it. They all went on maintenance diets. But in this 8 weeks period, they lose about 10 kilograms and their age goes down. So caloric restriction does reduce glycanage. And then when they went on these different diets, we saw that high carb, high protein, all these variations have C beneficial effect, like literally 50%. Have C benefit, have C negative effects. So there's no one size fits all in diet. We all respond differently to different foods, and you have to find what it is for you. And we don't yet have the tools or the tests you can do before to tell you what will work for you. You have to do the experiment on yourself. Then the question was, okay, so if there's no one diet that fits everyone, is there one way of eating? So can it be fasting? Can we all do some kind of fasting? And that will have a beneficial effect. And we got this group of blood samples from a very interesting cohort. I forgot where it is, but it's going to be published soon enough if it's not, where they didn't eat for 7 days. I think they also didn't, I think they did drink, you have to drink, but they didn't eat for 7 days straight.
It's almost like a water fast.
Yes, I think so. They wouldn't be alive if they didn't. So that would... and we measure their glycans, and they don't change so quickly. So they measure them, they had the blood samples from before and after. So some glycans change quicker, some, the aging ones don't change so much, but the cardio and lifestyle ones, the ones, they did actually change. So in this 1 week, we saw those, which will be predictive of hypertension risk and predictive of diabetes, went in the opposite direction.
Wow.
So fasting can be good. Is it for everyone? What is fasting? Is it a week of not eating? Is it 12 hours of not eating? I don't think anybody's figured this recipe out. And you had a lot of, like, there was a very big study with long-term data, all-cause mortality, that looked at fasting or eating windows. And people who had the, most, who had the biggest fasting cycles had the most cardio events. So, of course, this is epidemiology. So you're you don't know causality. You're kind of just looking correlation. So it's hard to say this is causal of it, but it's definitely not all good. Like there's nothing which is all good. You know that if you have an underactive thyroid and you fast, you're gonna exacerbate your condition. So it's not something that all of us, there's nothing that all of us should be doing. It's about figuring out what is it that you particularly should be doing. But some evidence that fasting is good. Now,
you've done quite a big thing on keto and sort of other styles of eating as well. And there is an individual response even to putting people on the same diet.
Yeah. That's a study I mentioned.
Yeah.
There's a high fat one, and you had half people with benefits, half people with negative changes.
That's it.
But we had lots of case studies of individuals, even nutritionists, who follow a strict keto, and their age goes up. And also their lipids don't look so good. And it's a healthy keto. It's a nutritionist. He knows what should be good. But their body is just not responding in the right way. And when they stop that and go to a different diet, they knock down 10 years or more.
Wow.
So it's very individual. Nothing wrong with keto. It's just about, is this for you or not? And the only maybe generally dangerous effect could be on microbiome. Because you're not feeding your microbiome. Yeah. So you might have this short-term benefit of keto because you're a better fat metabolizer, but long-term you might be causing some damage to your microbiome. So people get very obsessive about a lot of these diets, and they kind of go for this belief that it's the ultimate thing. So changing their belief, we had a team member who fasting. Who just had dinner for 7-8 years. She would skip breakfast, she would skip lunch, and she would only have... It's a way she maintained her weight, and she had more energy, she got used to it. It was just a way of life. But she had an underactive thyroid. And was on a path to Hashimoto. Didn't have all the symptoms, but had the blood work to confirm that she was heading to Hashimoto's.
Wow.
And when she would stop that and have more regular meals, her thyroid, her labs would go back to normal range. And her glycanage would improve.
Right.
So... everything has consequences unless you measure the full scope of impact, which we don't do. We just rely on symptoms. And how you feel is not always fully connected to what's happening in the biology. Yeah.
Very interesting. So, I honestly think this could be like a Netflix documentary, 4 or 5 hour watch, 2-part, 3-part documentary. But on that point, obviously we've spoken about your connection with Tim Spector before, and he was part of the original projects to sort of find out some of this information. He's obviously gone on to create and help with the Zoe project and individualizing nutrition. Yet to see any kind of exercise prescription off the back of that, just saying. But I think, where does this now start to fall in line with personalization?
I think they're as close as you can get right now.
Okay.
They really have the most amount of science in the field. There's another group in Tel Aviv that's also been moving in that direction quite a lot. And we try to look at what both are doing. But I think Zoe, because they have this very strong commercial side, is constantly conducting studies and getting huge amounts of data. We did a trial with them. We're waiting for results. So we did do their intervention study where, half were in personalized diet, half thought they were in personalized diet. So we don't have the results, but this is like the ultimate challenge.
Yes.
Have they figured out the personalized diet? So they might have. We'll find out soon enough.
Find out soon.
At least in terms of impact on a biological age. But, there could be many other things. And they measured everything.
I suppose that's the hardest part of doing this kind of science is basically double-blinding people and saying, okay.
But also when you get so big in a study, I think compliance is another issue. And I think, because I use the Zoe test and I love the product, I love the science. And I love how they don't, they keep it balanced. They have enough scientists in their team that they constantly have debates on what you can and cannot say and what's the healthy medium. And I think they reach the healthy medium majority of the time. What was I going to say? When I did it, well, of course, my lifestyle is absolutely crazy. I barely have time to sleep and eat, let alone do 2-week experiment on myself. The compliance is probably hard to get because it's quite intense to get onboarded, and then the app is super friendly, but am I going to open it daily and implement it in my nutrition? At least not for me. Maybe I'm not that user yet. Maybe there's people who really, especially maybe not in this period of my life. But I would worry about compliance in these big studies. So when even we get the data, the main question for me would be, was there actually compliance to say that worked or didn't work? So you can't even take every study's conclusion, especially lifestyle-based, as fact, because you don't really know if people actually did it. And they don't like to feel bad about themselves, so they just say they did.
Yep.
Yeah.
So when it comes to then the next moves for Glycanage, I've been so excited with the journey you've been on so far from where we first having conversations about it to where it's got to now. What is next?
We're still same as Zoe and many companies, doesn't matter what science you have. If your product is for the healthy, you're stuck in this wellness space. But when you're stuck in the wellness space, you can't really give access to the people who need it because it's a certain income bracket. It's people who care about their health. And many people should care about their health, but they don't. Or they don't know that they should. So we really want to get to, from here, we want to get to these a diagnostic level. So when we talk about diseases, that it's not like a genetic, here's this paper and this is where we got the data from. It's more of like, this is a medical claim and you should do these things and it's then clinician led. So it wouldn't be for consumers, but for clinics.
Gotcha.
Broader adoption, because right now the clinics we work with are, yes, longevity clinics, some are public already, some are even partially paid by the government. It is a space that eventually will be healthcare. But at the moment, it's very much wellness. It's very much like a certain demographic that is not even routine private healthcare.
So it's like a luxury almost.
It's a luxury for sure. We want to get into this down level of luxury, which is private healthcare, particularly concierge medicine in the US, because healthcare as this, it's still only going to give you support when you have a symptom, a problem. Maybe they do an annual check, very few, but it's not really this proactive looking after you before we get to a problem. And concierge medicine is something they invented in the US because on top of paying super expensive insurance, they want to keep they so want to keep themselves outside of the healthcare system that they pay a private doctor cash pay on top, like, $200 to $1,000 to $1 million a year to keep them out of the healthcare and using their insurance.
Don't want to use that.
So only made in the US. It's an 18 billion market, 17.5. So because the test is cash pay and we can't get insurance reimbursement yet, and that's going to take a long time, this is the next stage which we can go, where it's actually working with clinicians who are used to routine care, but they are also getting a little bit more into prevention, and they can utilize these novel or the up-and-coming technologies before healthcare does. So that's stage 2. Even with the current funding, we're only kind of, actually doing the European version of that. And then we need to fundraise to do the US version of that, where the actual market is. So happy for the fundraise. But damn, we have a long way to go.
It's like it's scratching the surface, but
and then the ultimate goal. So we have these really well scientifically, even clinically developed biomarkers. We have the CVD prediction that started from Tim's cohorts. So his Twins UK, another cohort with him was like comparing the glycan score to the cardio risk score, the traditional ones, and then longitudinal tracking with the twins, and then comparison to clinical biomarkers. We did in a very big German cohort, and then this 27,000 Germans, and then predicting events. Wow. We did tons of science, and now we did one with Harvard, 2 randomized control trials, where they compare to traditional biomarkers, which we outperform or give more information. We see gender differences in predictions, which you don't see in any other biomarker. Right. Not that I'm aware of, and it's up to 10 years in advance, CVD prediction, or 8.3 years in advance. So it's something that healthcare could utilize. It can be something that if you have a risk, like family history, a risk population, you reimburse it for that individual from a certain age, and they get access to this before they actually have an event. So to take that through regulation, which is the ultimate goal we want to get to, would need an FDA trial. And FDA doesn't like the stuff that's done been before. They want a new thing. So maybe they accept some of the existing data. Now we have all these expensive regulatory advisors. Maybe somewhere they'll save us something from what we've done out of 40 million in grant funding. So that's a lot of grants, and you don't want to know how many applications to these grants. Probably 1,000. Like we applied for 26 last year in 6 months.
Whoa!
And we got 4.
Whoa! And those applications are not small either.
Oh no, it's the biggest. So now at least we have a mix of commercial and grant, so we can move things along, because grants only give you to a certain level, and they don't get you to the market, all of these things. Maybe to do a little bit of regulatory support in Europe, but beyond that, they don't care. At least the ones we have access to. So ultimate goal is having to run this FDA trial, which has to be for a single disease. So we can't do it for the 70 diseases. We have to select one. And then it's a prediction. So you have to run the 5-year trial. Let's say to predict hypertension. There we have this really nice AUC, which you know about a lot now, sensitivity specificity, which will cost maybe about 100 million.
Small change.
Yes. And then we can have a reversible FDA-approved test to predict hypertension. It has to be, that population, it's 250,000 or million. Now we're getting to dyslexia. We're getting a 0.
Where's the 0 going to go? Where's the comma in this one?
I would need to see it in visual. And then I can read it off the page.
Exactly. 3 zeros is 1,000, 6 zeros is a million. Okay, we've got that.
So all my point is lost now. But no, 50 million at risk. It is million.
Okay.
It's 250 million. No, it's not, because that's the whole US population. So it's definitely not.
I mean, everyone in the US is at risk of something, that's for sure.
It's 250,000.
Okay, there we go.
This is what it must be, but I will double check. There must be the 50,000 of those per year at risk. And if the insurance was 1,000, does this equal 50 billion in revenue? I think so.
Let's just say it does.
Okay, thank God I have a CFO who's really good at math.
That's why we've got a CFO as well. I'm the nerd.
You have to admit your weaknesses.
Exactly.
And if I have to draw every math equation in my brain, trust me, this is a very slow process. Some people need none of this to calculate.
Show me your workings out. How long have you got?
2 weeks later.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so there's a lot going.
No, it's great return on investment. That's the point of it.
Yeah.
If you invest 100 million into a trial, and you have 50 billion per year return, it's a great investment, but
Yes.
it's a big investment.
Yeah.
And
Big outlay for a potential big return. But
and nobody's going to give us 100 million off the bat. We first have to do maybe 15, 20 to build reputation with investors, then maybe 40, 50, and maybe after that.
yeah.
And God knows, well, let's see. Anytime that we spoke, you were always talking about the science of it, the reason why something works like it does, and you even had a company that's biomechanics, and you tried to fix my shoulder, which I had to do some daily exercise, which I just didn't do. So my shoulder is still broken, and I'm still upside down. But I'm sure it would have fixed me if I did it continuously. So you always had an interest in the body, and I guess there was always, I always had the same thing of should I go back into degree, but I was lucky that, I have two parents who've done it and a whole, 60 scientists in the lab. So if I need some piece of information or credibility, I say, okay, you go do it. You go present this. Or I call them and ask them, what does this mean? So for you, it was just you and you did it. And it's amazing.
Oh, thanks.
How was it?
Yeah, interest is probably a too weak a word. I'm probably verging on obsessed with the human body, and that's probably, I don't know why, but I think my mum was a nurse, and I remember very vividly seeing one of her nursing books when I was a kid on her shelf, on our shelf, and then it had like a skeleton on it, and it was one of her first anatomy and physiology books when she was a nurse, like 50 years ago. No, it was 40 years ago. I've always been fascinated with biology. Just didn't like learning about insects and plants. Just wanted to know more about the human body and how we function, how we work, and how our cells communicate. We spoke about that.
Yeah.
How have we got to this point, and how do we survive? Like the billions of things that we've got going on in our body in a second. It's surprising any of us are able to walk around and do what we do. So I did my personal training course because I didn't get into uni, and thanks to dyslexia and time blindness and not being able to read through the UCAS forms quick enough, and generally being disinterested with the whole idea of writing an essay, kind of drove me to self-study a lot. And I felt like when we started training together, I was kind of on this hard rock place of being like, I've self-studied so much and done so much of my own stuff and podcasts, YouTube videos, gone to lectures, like sat down with professionals and tried to take as much on as I could. There was a glass ceiling with my credential, which was I've been quoted in the press and so on as being personal trainer. And at some point, people were starting to have an objectivity of what a personal trainer was, or like an idea of what a personal trainer was and what they were capable of. And I just kind of felt like I was outgrowing that title. And so I was like, well, what do I want to be then? My identity has been for the past 19 years has been personal trainer. And I actually sat on a workshop with a guy. It was a boxing workshop. There's a guy called Boxing Science. Big up to Alan Ruddock and the team over there. And he introduced himself as exercise physiologist. I was like, ooh, that sounds good. That sounds good. I was like, how do I get that? And it was an MSc that was the only entry to get that qualification. I was like, oh man, that's what I want. Is I want to learn the biology of exercise, and there was no other route I could get that. I was like, I'm going to have to do it. I've done other things like the biomechanics stuff that we were doing together. I've considered going off and doing osteopathy because I wanted to have that added credential, but it wasn't what I wanted based on other people's feedback. Some of my students were going to become an osteopath. They're like, don't do it. Or physio or whatever it was. They're like, look, just do what you're doing. It's great. But this has suddenly clicked. And my wife Laura was like, just do it, if not now, never. So during COVID, I signed up to St. Mary's Simmys University, and just graduated just recently. So many demons to conquer.
Oh yes, no, you were telling me about it earlier, and I have no idea how I managed to graduate. But yeah, no, it's such a powerful story. And I love the story because I think lots of people who are dyslexic, they put so many boundaries on themselves just because you learn in a different way. So it's not the same criteria. And, I think Well, we shouldn't go into education and all of that. And I think it's still pretty rubbish. But also, I think you and Laura, the support there, I love it.
Oh.
I mean, it's not, you don't see it in many places, and I do not see many such strong couples. And you know, I avoided weddings from all of my friends because I thought all of them got married too early and had kids too early, and I was kind of against the idea. I thought, especially for women, I thought, please do your life first. And then I only went to one wedding because my ex invited me to a cousin, so I was like, okay, well, I have to go and meet his parents. And then the only other wedding that I went because I actually wanted to go was yours.
Oh,
yes.
You're going to make me
And
cry on
it
the
was
podcast.
no, I don't want to make you cry. I'm so sorry. It was the sweetest wedding in the world. I don't think they're usually like that. But the two of you were so cute. It was like both of you cried as you were walking out.
I'm definitely a crier when it comes to that stuff.
No, it's how it's supposed to be. So I think that part is really important, and I'm so glad you have it, because I think that helps you do anything you want to do in life, no matter how hard it is.
Yeah. Growing up with a mum who was a nurse, and I absolutely loved her to bits, and a dad who was a policeman, they were very much traditional sort of job backgrounds, and I just never felt like I clicked with education, work. I was too many ideas flowing in my head and not enough action. Generally because I was always being told by school to go into a traditional work environment and job. Everything about school is preparing you for work, for a job, and being in that job and being useful as a worker. I just kind of felt like I said, no, this is my brain's just too creative and thinking about how to structure things and challenging a problem, fix a problem, and being bound by red tape and lots of meetings didn't really appeal to me in so many senses. But then suddenly having the support of someone like Laura, and I tell her this probably way too unoften, but I'll try and make it a point as much as I can, is just that having someone who is unconditionally going to prop you up is rare. But when you get it, especially from our background, when so many people are suggesting that you're not good enough, that you aren't going to make the grade and you aren't going to do great things, you're going to work in Tesco's for the rest of your life, which was my actual career advice from my college. Thank you very much. We'll get into that another time. Is rare, and suddenly then you feel like you've got this limitless supply of energy, and I think to do that and take it on and to start the business that we've got and to do what we're doing, and we're going through our own fundraising situation right now, to start to then take on more and more and more suddenly becomes exciting rather than nerve-wracking.
That's amazing. I'm so happy for both of you. And my God, what you'll do in the future, I can't wait. No,
thank you. Well, we probably have to do this thing at some point, but when maybe when you're back in London and had some food.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
We're going to do a lunch podcast.
That's a great idea.
There's
probably not enough lots of random noise and video footage.
We'll just have soup. But honestly, you're probably one of the people in my life that's stayed front and foremost in everything that I've done since we've met, and just a massive honour to have you on and chat and be involved in what we're doing and everything. So thank you so much.
No, thank you. I'm so horrible at this anyhow. But I really appreciate the friendship.
Oh, well, in that case, we'll sign off there. Thank you very much.